Hi, y'all. So we are nearly done with Unit 4, Political Geography. Today we're going to be talking about challenges to sovereignty. And some of these we have gone over before, but overall, you need to explain how political, economic, cultural, and technological changes challenge state sovereignty. So go ahead and take a pause here, read through all this. You will notice that we've already talked about devolution. Some of these ideas also relate back to Unit 1 concepts. And most of today's focus is going to be on supranational organizations. So, just as a quick review, sovereignty is the state's authority to control its territory and govern itself. Self determination, this is the right of all people to govern themselves. So, usually, a nation, ethnicity, or former colony wants to govern themselves and establish sovereignty over their own state and have control over themselves, make their own choices, oftentimes may result in independence movements or devolution. Again, devolution, due to centrifugal forces, power is shifted from central government or administration to regional authorities, which are usually reflective of nations. So the previous objective, we went into a lot of detail about devolution. And then for types of political entities, this is going back to 4.1, we have state, nation, nation state, stateless nation, multi-state nation, multi-nation state, and autonomous region. So by now, you should feel confident with having a grasp of all of these concepts and ideas. So for devolution, states must concede or share some power to autonomous regions or subnational political units to avoid conflict. So it's when the centralized government gets power gets distributed to regional areas because they want it, because they want more of their self-governance. So here are a few different examples in different places in the world, including Spain, Belgium, Canada, Nigeria. So all of these areas have gone through devolutionary movements. It can cause destabilization of the state through disagreement, disunity, and a desire for more autonomy. So when you have an area within your own country saying that they want more political power, they want to make their own decisions, then you don't have that unity. When a state cannot resolve its issues, these devolutionary forces may result in disintegration of a state. So, one of the biggest examples is probably the Soviet Union. Advancements in communication technology can be challenging for state sovereignty. So I have a little star here next to time-space compression. Everybody should know that very well by now. And that's the relative distance between places shrinks due to modern advancements in transportation and communication technology. So because of technology, places and people are closer together and having more ability to interact. Constant connections between people and places can result in information and news stories being broadcast around the world. Access to information, knowledge, and services is then also expanded. Instant communication with large groups. So in a blink of an eye, you can tell a huge group of people the same message. And it can also lead to propaganda and misinformation, which I think everybody should be well aware of, right, for yourself as you're using your technology. Also, it can increase devolutionary pressures and challenges to state sovereignty and can lead to social movements. So it's a lot easier for these groups of people who want devolution, who want to have their own decisions, who want to challenge the sovereignty of their state. It allows them to mobilize and connect in a way that was not as easy before. Also, supranational organizations, we're going to go into a little bit more of this. They can be a challenge to state sovereignty and the ability of a state to be able to make their own decisions. So supranational organizations would be an alliance of 3 or more states that work together in pursuit of a common goal. These common goals can be economic, social, cultural, political, military, or environmental, and they're typically regional in scale, but there are some that are globalized, like the United Nations. So here are a few examples of different supranational organizations. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with some of these, like the United Nations, the European Union, NATO probably as well. But as mentioned, some of these are regionalized into particular regions of the globe. So there are some big positives of supranational organizations and having a country be part of a supranational organization. These decrease conflict and promote cooperation between member states. So those that are actually part of that particular organization. It can also lead to more environmental sustainability. So for instance, the Arctic Council works together on climate change research and conservation. So a lot of positive goals that they might have collectively. Also, this idea of economies of scale or increased trade and bargaining power in order to make more money for the member nations. So being part of these groups can mean that you have access to a reduction of trade barriers, a reduction of embargoes and tariffs. There might even be some free trade relationships and agreements, which are beneficial to those that are part of these groups. Also, collective defense. So for military organizations, this idea that an attack against one is an attack against all. So NATO member countries have that benefit, right? I'm sure we've heard a little bit about the Ukraine wanting to be part of NATO and that kind of initiating a little bit of that conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So if a country is attacked within NATO, then all member countries are required to assist that country. So kind of like a strength in numbers thing. So some downsides of supranational organizations: they can challenge state sovereignty by limiting economic or political actions of member states. So even though there are some economic and political benefits, it also means that you have to go along with what the group decides. So in some cases, a particular country might be receiving a little bit less of that benefit economically or politically for different decisions or for different time periods. So the European Union is one example of this. Some things include open borders, a single market, which means that there's free trade, there's more movement of goods and services and money, a lot easier to do that. Also having a common currency of the euro, which not every member state has adopted, and also common environmental policy. So this whole idea of Brexit, right? The UK did not feel like they were receiving enough economic and political benefit and decided to leave, right? So NATO, another example of how it could be a con, right, or one of the downsides, is that membership can be expensive. And the question is always, is there actually equal participation of all members? So if we look at this chart here for how many or how much countries put into NATO, the US overwhelmingly puts in the majority of the money. And yet every country that's within this organization receives that benefit. So, I mean, obviously there are other reasons why the United States allows this, right? That gives them influence and political sway with these other countries. But it always begs the question of, is it actually equal? And the answer is no. When it comes to certain elements of it, it may not be. So again, make sure you've read through some of these details, and then you can move on to the last